in Southwest Mississippi. And boy, is he up to some good things. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So let's talk about how you got to Macomb real quick, because you're not born and raised in Mississippi,
Right.
but you do call Mississippi home now to the point that you're reaching back out into the community.
Yes.
So what, short bullet point, what led you to Mississippi?
God.
Okay, that's
Finished.
one bullet point. Good. Next question.
Family. Yeah, family. My mother lives in a neighboring county. She's 83, so I prefer to be closer to her to help her out with some things. So pretty much God, family, purpose.
Yeah.
Finding your destiny and what your purpose to do.
And you have found your purpose there in Macomb, reaching out and planting seeds of all kinds and really helping the community. So when you got settled in Macomb, when did your heart start to stir, or what did it start to stir for, to sort of say, Kevin can make a difference here, or maybe I should try and make a difference here?
Right. So I had transitioned from the military. I did 21 years in the Air Force. So I was used to a certain amount of structure. And sense of duty, service, and things of that nature. So transitioning into the civilian sector, I was looking for those things. Even though it's two different worlds, there's a lot of things that parallel, right? There's opportunities. So I started seeking out opportunities to serve. So I got into substitute teaching and the local school systems. That put me around a team of people that had a common vision, similar to the military. So that's pretty much what led me into that space of giving back on the civilian side, was seeking out opportunities to do that and things that fit my skill set. Growing up as a kid, I always admired certain teachers. They were like role models to me. And I always felt like when I had the opportunity to be in that position, once I retired from the military, a certain level of financial freedom, they say, what would you do for free? I wouldn't sub for free, but it's close to it. Teachers aren't paid very well.
Right.
Could be paid more. But it was an opportunity to pour back into the young me, the things that I was looking for when I was growing up. So they say you can't go back in time, but you can. It's called mentorship. That's something that I say. The young you, what were some of the questions that you had, challenges that you had, being able to come back into that position, especially being a male. Sometimes when I walk through the hallways, it's like they've seen a dinosaur, because it's not a common thing in a lot of the school districts. So to provide that positive male image, and just put myself in their shoes. The world has advanced a lot more. Yesterday you were talking about technology and things of that sort. So we're a little disconnected in some ways and more too connected in other ways.
Amen.
So just taking all those things into account and what I could do, and that's what leads me to share that one of my bullet points is purpose. What are you uniquely designed to do? And most of the time that aligns you with needs to be done. So
I love that. And too, I'm going to leave here, Kevin, thinking about when you say you can't go back in time, or you think about, especially as I am inching up to a major milestone, which would be almost 40. I know for some of you, you're like, oh, that's nothing. You're still a baby. Well, for me, I feel like it's halfway over. But you think you looking back and you're like, but you can make a difference by finding the you
Right.
and mentoring and maybe helping them, through different times, or learn lessons that you learned the hard way, and maybe, help pave it forward, whether that's with your children or through other kids, because they need that as well. Okay, but you also came to this idea of a garden, and I love that. When I put my dietitian hat on, I think this is awesome. Anytime we can connect the people of a community with health and fresh foods, that's a great thing. But there's also other wonderful aspects of a community garden. So give us the backstory of Gertrude's Garden.
Sure. So Gertrude's Garden is named after my grandmother. Her name was Gertrude Hughes. She owned a small neighborhood grocery store on the actual site that the garden is now. But this was in the 40s and the 50s. I never met her. She passed away in 1968. I knew of her legacy, but I wasn't born until 76, so I'm 6 years old.
I was like, oh, so you're you've already passed that mark. You're still alive, so that's good to know.
Right. So her work to me was a cornerstone in the community by providing those food items, because then we start to get into food insecurity and things like that. So the space, over that amount of time, you can imagine that it had grown up. People had started putting waste in there, almost like a little mini forest landfill combination. Both lots on both sides were overgrown. So once I took control of the taxes, a cousin was in Minnesota. I would just happen to go visit.
So the land had always been in your family, right,
It
Kevin?
always had been in my family, but I didn't know anything about it. But on a visit to Minnesota from one of my duty stations, my cousin said, "Hey, pay the taxes on this land." That was it.
Thanks, cousin.
I'm like, "Where is it at?" Macomb. I'm not from there. I've never lived there. Yeah. But I ended up going down there and checking this land out, and I ended up picking the Macomb because of the radius to my mom. It could have been Macomb, Brookhaven, or Natchez. She's in the center of all of those. So I just happened to pick Macomb. And I go over there and I see this place, and there's a housing authority complex right next to it. And I see kids coming out of it, but they're coming out into this space, which at the time I was calling an inspiration desert, because there's nothing to be inspired by in this space. So I sat there for months. I go out there, sit and watch how the ecosystem worked. So I started cleaning it up, getting the trees out, all the trash out, the majority of the trash out. And I have a friend, her name is Sarah Doman, and we've done some community projects. She owns a flower farm, and she's an art teacher. So I said, "Hey, you think you can donate some flowers? I think I want to start a garden." No, I didn't know anything about any agriculture or anything. But so over time, over that year working out there, just when I would get a little discouraged, I wasn't going to quit, but just feeling a certain way about this stuff, one of the blooms would come out from the flowers that she donated. So it was always something to keep me going. I was inspired by the kids, and they would just walk by and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" The adults were like, "What are you doing? You're a preacher, you're this, you're that." I'm like, "I'm just a regular person. I have to clean it up."
It's my property. Yeah, it's your
by
property.
ordinance, you know what I mean? Even though nobody else played like that.
How big is this? Is it just a lot? Like
it's 75 by 100. So they're multiple, right? Mm-hmm. So once I got that one cleared, the one to the south, I talked to some of the descendants, because these are all air property. People have been gone forever, right? And the people that are taking care of them, they're from out of town. I talked to them. I said, "Hey, you mind if we cut and clean it?" They're like, "We're not going to do nothing, you know?" So we started planting. We actually put structures there. The one to the north, same thing. Then there was 2 abandoned houses. The city has knocked them down. So we pretty much have the whole block. We don't own it. Cut, clean, plant, and seeds of hope.
But still, that's an improvement.
Right. And then the street, it was called West Alley. Now it's called Gertrude's Garden Alley. The city renamed it. One of the community leaders, Glenda Jordan, she went and petitioned the city to change the name to Gertrude's Garden, because in the reality, there were no addresses to change anyway, because it was all vacant lots. You didn't have to go through that process of people having to change their addresses and things. We got crosswalks installed, slow kids playing. These are things that
How long have you been on
normal.
This journey, Kevin, in Macomb?
We say established in 2019, but I started a year prior to that.
So this has taken, 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of slow. And I think that's important, because oftentimes we want things to happen quickly.
Right.
But it was just sort of a slow progress of you first recognizing that it was there, having the intention of just wondering what it could be, and then slowly sort of it growing. You don't have to see the whole picture in the beginning to, sort of get it started.
No. Dr. King said faith is taking the first step without seeing the whole staircase.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah.
But if you saw the whole staircase, would you have taken it?
You might get tired. You might be like, "That's too far."
It's too far. I can't do that.
I think it depends on your personality. Spiritually, I think the Creator knows what your tolerance is for things. Some people, He'll show it. Some people can't handle that. So for me, it's been a journey, just walking, taking steps. Glenda always says one step in a positive direction can create change. So just continue to taking those steps. Most of the time, everything aligns.
Everything does align, and it's aligned for you in other ways too there in Macomb. So we've got more with Kevin. Gertrude's Garden, which is named after your grandmother who lived in Macomb. You never got to meet her, but how cool is it that you get to continue her legacy? Now, your mom, she's near. Is that your mom's mom? Was Gertrude your mom's mom?
That's my dad's mom. That's her mother-in-law.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how does she feel about you utilizing family space to, continue her legacy and her name within the community, or really the families?
Yeah.
In total.
Everybody loves it. Everybody's supportive of it. My family in Minnesota that kind of turned me on to it. My family in Louisiana that I'm a native of, and then my family in Mississippi. My mother-in-law Gertrude is my dad's mother, but she actually introduced my mom and my dad. So they had a really good relationship. So the legacy of it. I think that's the proudest piece.
And two, that it work, and to me, from a community garden standpoint, is that it's working. Like, it's still thriving, and the community's sort of buying into it. What do you say is the secret sauce to that? Because not every community garden that gets started with good intent. I haven't found a community garden that wasn't started with good intentions.
Right.
I don't think. But
depends on what you're planting there,
depends on what you're planting. But still, I guess they would have good intentions of some capacity. But they don't always make it or flourish. And there's a lot of reasons why. But why do you feel like Gertrude's is flourishing?
I always say that the strongest structure that we can build in the garden is relationships. It's not what we plant, it's not what we do as far as art and things like that, but our programming propagates relationships. So when we plant, the kids plant. We call them the garden kids. These are residents of the area. And I was talking about earlier, sometimes gardens are so out of the way of foot traffic that the only person that can interact with it is the person that has access to it. But this is between a housing project and a convenience store. So there's foot traffic all day, every day. The kids, they live on St. Augustine, the name of that book, right? And they have when they walk out of the front door, they're facing the garden. So that, I think, is the biggest thing. The programming that's involved, we do yoga, horseback riding, all of this stuff comes into their space. And in a lot of places, urban areas, people don't really interact with people outside their community. So there's a culture difference. So we bring a lot of people in to make that connection. If you do something positive, we're open to having you come do programming. Of course, I'll be there, or someone at the garden will be there to facilitate, to make sure everything goes fine. But yeah, art teachers come out there, people that make jewelry, anything to expose them to something outside their community that they won't see on an everyday basis, because we look at the opportunities as a menu. If you come outside your house and all you have are negative options, that's presented to you at a young age, especially. Our youngest is 6, and it goes all the way up to 18, and of course the adults. But that's the menu that's being offered. So we try to add to that menu with those positive things. So that at least the options are there. We're not trying to save anybody.
Well,
we're just saying these are the options.
These are the options. Well, if you think about it, where you just started with this, Kevin, was that you had this family land and then you just cleaned it up, right? And just cleaning it up and planting little flowers and even having them donated, that's changing the menu item, right? We're elevating now what they get to see and sort of think about their community. Going the step further, which I think so many of us could do in our own towns if you have those dilapidated or, run down places, trying to encourage that just to be removed and just cleaned up. Just the cleaning up part. Green space provides then, and then it gives the opportunity for new things to grow and flourish, or have that sort of inspiration, as you say, from other community people. You don't have to do it all, right? Like you just can do your part by, cleaning something up or planting the seeds. But you took this further and wrote wrote 2 books. So what inspired you to become a children's book author?
I have 2 children of my own, and
That'll do it.
we biological kids. I have a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 daughters, and we really value reading. With them growing up, we really reading to them when they're in the womb, so we understand the value of reading. So that connection pushed me into the genre of youth readership. For me, growing up, my mom bought an encyclopedia set. Way back then. They used to come around, the salesmen, and they would go door to door selling encyclopedias, because we didn't have internet. It wasn't around as far as I knew at that time. So she valued the value of education, right? She got to 9th grade. She was born in a different generation, so the access to school wasn't the same, but she always encouraged us. So she bought an encyclopedia, and that's what I kind of read. And I ended up going to those places by joining the military. So I read about Dubai back then. You know, I've been to 48 states, lived in multiple countries. So, but it started in a book. So for me, going back to what did I need or what worked for me as a child, that's the same system that I use with going into the children's book. This is what worked for me. So it's an opportunity to go back in time and do that.
Well, I think still for many children, their first idea of something beyond their own zip code is in a book, right? I mean, they don't really get it in TV the way that maybe we used to. I know my grandmother loved the Travel Channel because she had reached an age where she couldn't travel anymore, but she could through her imagination through those shows. Right. Kids don't really grasp that, but they grasp it in a book when they are sitting there reading and putting themselves in the characters, and especially if it sort of looks like them or it's named after their street, which you did very intentionally.
And the book is dedicated to them. When you go to the dedication page, it's the Garden Kids. Those kids are the kids that I first met. And the name in the middle, his name is Kevin. Because I'm not really good at names, but my name's Kevin, so that's easy to remember.
You know, it was a good name for one, so it might be a great name for another, Yeah,
and his last name was Augustine, which is the name of the street. So, of course, we formed a pretty strong bond, Kevin Augustine. But the reason that drove me to highlight their community is because they saw it in a different way. These are undiscovered gems that have existed before they were born. I was born, and they're here. So I asked them, well, who was St. Augustine? This is the street that you live on. I had a general idea. I didn't even know myself, but none of us knew. So let's go find out, right? So that's the second page of the book. It talks about who St. Augustine was because you're growing up on the street. And it kind of follows a path of everything that's around your community within a 2 or 3 block radius and identifying and understanding the value that's attached to it. So it makes the whole atmosphere more inviting for yourself, right? And you just attribute more pride to it than you would have otherwise. This is just another street. This is just another building. But all these places have significant value.
Because they don't just name, right. Like they're historical. Right. I never really, I mean, I knew that, Kevin, but like I never thought about with my own kids sort of using something they drive on every day, or they don't drive, but they ride on every day or through to stop and use that sort of as an educational standpoint. I think that's a really good point. We could all do better at that and opening up our kids to the history that's right there in our in our address or within, I don't know how all new neighborhoods work in terms of naming streets, but at least within our historic districts of our own communities.
Exactly.
Why were these streets named after who they were named after or why they were made that way? Do you find, Kevin, that the garden children, that they were hungry for this information once they knew that, because they don't know what they don't know. So were they interested when you opened their world up to the history or learning or thinking about it deeper?
Right. I think that was one of the benefits to alignment because they were. That's why I was calling it Inspiration Desert. There was nothing to grab hold to that would nourish them anyway. So it was like prime real estate, even though it was trashed, to plant seeds of hope. We had to keep using all these terms, but we had to get down in the weeds, you know what I mean, to work it, right? So like I said, when they were coming out of their living, their residences, this is what you see: overgrown lots, shell casings, mattresses, appliances, all of this disarray. So what does that do to people mentally, right? It creates a sense of isolation. It does a whole bunch of things. It increased pest, disease. People don't really want to walk too much, so you reduce the opportunities for exercise. It plays out in a whole bunch of different ways. The convenience store is the main food source. So we're talking about food insecurity again. So why not plant produce? So all of these things, I asked Kevin, where does a bell pepper come from? It comes from Macomb Market. Yeah, but what does it come from before it's shipped there? I don't know. Well, see,
he's never been encouraged to think about it, right?
So here's these seeds.
Yeah.
You take them in your hand and plant them, and come out here and water them every day, because they used to have a gallon jug for water. So.
And then they can grow into beautiful things, which is going on in Macomb. We've got more with cleaning up a lot.
Yeah, and I didn't even have the proper tools for that. I was out there with a machete, so it took a lot longer than it would otherwise. And but we got through it. That's the important thing. And all that time, that took a year, because I didn't know what I was doing. But God knew what He was doing, because that whole year, those kids got to watch me do that. We didn't even talk. I didn't even talk to people. I was so immersed in getting it down to a certain level. When people would come and talk, I had to stop working and engaging, eye contact. But all of that happened for a reason, because I got to learn people's names. And even if it was a nickname, Duck, it was Mr. Duck. So I addressed everybody with the proper handle, right? So we ended up having a mutual respect. I've never had any conflict in all of these years over there, regardless of what people say happens over there. I've never had any issues. Zero.
Because you took the time, too, to be a part of that particular community, right? And I think sometimes, going back with good intentions, we come barreling in with resources and wanting to help and wanting to change, but there's a level of trust that has to be acquired before
Absolutely.
They are going to take, or anyone living in any community is going to take someone seriously if you come blazing in. So the softer approach is usually the longer lasting approach, but it's the tougher approach. I mean, it wasn't guaranteed that these relationships would have been created either, but that really honestly wasn't your intention in the beginning. This is sort of morphed.
Initially, yeah, it morphed and then it evolved, and trust is important, but also respect. So there's this term called cultural humility, and that means basically your way isn't the best way, especially in someone else's environment.
Don't tell my husband that.
But especially in someone else's environment, because I don't live there.
Right.
So how can I come in
insightful.
and say, well, we're going to do things this way? Now, I offered ideas, and you take a step, right? And then people are going to let you know, that's not going to work. That's not going to last. This isn't going to go. You know what I mean? You take all those things into consideration, and what happens is whatever vision I started with becomes a shared vision, because I'm taking in the residents are taking ownership of what's going to happen, how we move forward. Because I have no idea. Whatever I thought the end picture was going to be, I have no idea, because now it's more of a creative space, because we have a lot of public art out there now. And it's not a thing in Macomb. So, these things morph, and people start to feel more comfortable about expressing themselves in different ways. And we're talking about people with substance abuse issues, people with, domestic violence backgrounds, adults I'm talking about. So you get a community of artists, and you don't see it every day, but you start to see different mannerisms change. You start to see different nonverbals change over time.
You've created a safe place.
Yes. I mean, there's people that go there just for that. And they call it different things. I'm going to the beach. One guy, he says he calls it the beach, right? And maybe when he looks out there, he sees tranquility, right? Another guy, they call it the park. But now we do have park equipment out there. But they were calling it that. That was the term. And we have a big sign that says Gertrude's Garden. But the point is that incorporating everyone's vision, it becomes what it needs to be for everyone. Because when I started, I said, I'm rehabbing this lot. What I found is the lot was rehabbing me. You know what I mean? So, and it's the same thing with the kids. A lot of the people that come out and interact with the kids, initially they're like, oh, these kids need some love. When they get out of that car, Miss Glenda, and all those kids run up to them, and it's a group hug, that's doing something for her. You know what I mean? So that's the transformative power, because we didn't want it to be transactional. I needed it to get to a certain point, to get it clean. I needed to just get it clean. That's how I felt. But we started having meet and greets once we got it safe for the kids.
You've used the word we a lot, Kevin. Who would say your core, because I know you haven't done this by yourself. You maybe did some of the cleaning and the grunt work by yourself, but you certainly haven't run all of these sort of creative outlets alone.
Right.
Who is your core team?
My core team, and I include all these names even if they're not continuously on the journey, they were there at instrumental times. Sarah Doman, the flower farmer, the artist in the flower, that's her company. She started it out with what I was able to start growing with. She brought it out there, and she engaged the kids, like did like a little class with them the initial time. Glenda Jordan, she pretty much runs the programming and the calendar. So events like Hallelujah Night is going to be October 30th. November 18th will be the third annual Thanksgiving meal. It's a catered meal. Feed up from 150 to 200 people. That's her thing, right? Mr. Jerry White, he's pretty much the groundskeeper. Every day goes out there and makes sure there's not a potato chip bag on the ground, because you have to reinforce that for so long till it becomes habit, right? And yeah, I would say those are the core. Miss Felicia Carter, Juan Brister, and these are people that are part of other ministries.
I was going to say, because you are not, Gertrude's Garden is not a 501c. It's not
it's
like
just some people that believe in Together We Grow and planting seeds of hope.
So I love that too, because again, we try to create mountains out of no hills. Mm-hmm. Whenever we want to do something in our communities and we feel the led to do, and then we can talk ourselves right out of it because it's, you know, this great big mountain, when really you just need to get going.
Get going. Mr. Jerry White always says, when people see that you're serious about something, they'll be serious about helping you. So you can't deny work, right? Like I said, just being there, and you know how the summers are here, all day with the inadequate tools to start with. Just watching somebody do that day after day after day after day. And like I said, the kids, when we did start talking, they would tell me, we see you out there and, you know, in the heat and all that kind of stuff. You working hard. And I say anything that's worth having is worth working hard for, right? Because it's all about messaging with them, because that positive male image piece, there's some, but there's never enough. So anytime that I have the opportunity to engage with them, that's the type of language that I need to be speaking. They get the other language and concepts all day. So it's just planting that seed, going back to that principle.
Well, and I think, too, opening their imaginations to the possibilities, because, you know, one thing, too, here over time and time, I've seen such positive outcomes is just people who took time to ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or get curious about, you know, where are you going to college? Just those, like, simple questions. You don't recognize how many in many of our communities are never even asked to even be able to start that, like, visionary process of that would be capable, you know, possible for them. So, you know, just being engaged. Engaged, and then, you know, simple questions. Do you know the history behind your street name? Like, I mean, to open their worlds up to something greater, because we do that. Most good intended parents are doing that anyway when you're engaged with your kids' activities or schools, but not all children have engaged family members.
Right, and they're occupied by other things. I think one of the key things is to be as curious as a kid would be. So these things that we take for granted are just forgotten about. Sometimes when you look up in the sky on a clear day and there's a few clouds, when I was a kid, we used to say, what shape is that? And things like that. I found that a lot of these kids actually never look up. So, you know, we lay back on the bench and that's all we see. We create our own canvas, right? And we play that game, because a lot of things that have been lost that we take for granted, they created a lot of avenues for dialogue and understanding and actually making connections with things. So things that we can connect with, even though we're just generationally, we have to be able to bridge those gaps. They're into tech, so they're able to teach me things. So when we have an event, you're the photographer. You're the DJ, because they can do all of that from their phone. Awesome. Trying to involve them, engage them, and understand, you know, bridging that gap, and also having that boundary where it's needed, you know. But the relationship is the strongest structure we can develop out there.
Well, I love this relationship we've created. I know this isn't going to be the last with you, Kevin. This has just been such a blessing today. Where can folks get your books and learn more about Gertrude's Garden?
On Amazon. You can go on Gertrude's Garden on Facebook.